Hey guys! Today we're going to go into a little more detail about speciation, what causes it, and its numerous variations.
So what is speciation? Well, speciation occurs when new species are created by a series of evolutionary processes that result in the reproductive isolation of a population. The most famous example of this occurrence can be traced back to the time of evolving dinosaurs, who due to speciation evolved into what is known today as the two species, lizards and birds.
Speciation can basically be broken down into two types, prezygotic barriers and postzygotic barriers.
Prezygotic is a barrier that happens before fertilization, and postzygotic is a barrier that happens after fertilization.
So, one example of a prezygotic barrier includes habitat isolation. What this basically means is that two species are in completely different areas and are too separated to meet and reproduce. Take, for example, a woman living in New York and a man living in California. It is only logical that the man living in California will most likely find someone to get married to and have kids with if she lives nearby, and this same idea goes for the woman in New York. While it is possible that if they met, they could potentially have kids, due to the great distance between them, this possibility just isn't as likely.
Another prezygotic barrier is temporal isolation. This is when the species reproduce at different times of the day or at different times of the year, so they never reproduce at the same time and can't do so together. For example, let's say in this weird version of the world, everyone is fated to meet their soulmate on the subway, who they will eventually marry and reproduce with. And let's say that every day a man takes the subway in the morning, but every day a woman takes the subway in the afternoon. This means that they will likely never get a chance to meet, and as a result, they will never get to reproduce together.
Behavioral isolation is a little different. While the other two scenarios included the two potential mates never meeting, behavioral isolation includes two species that, despite meeting time and time again, will never mate because of a difference in behavior. This sounds strange, I know, but hear me out. Take, for example, two people, one from France and one from America. Completely different parts of the world, yet they both happen to meet while they are on vacation in the Bahamas. Although they met, they are unable to communicate because of the language barrier, and the man's French accent does not attract the female. Although they physically are able to reproduce, one or both choose not to engage in this activity. In this case, the woman chose not to do so.
Mechanical isolation is when two people, although they might want to reproduce, they physically cannot because their anatomy doesn't fit together. Think of this as how a lock and key work. If the key does not fit into the lock, it is impossible to open the door, or in this case, to reproduce.
The last type of prezygotic barrier includes gametic isolation. This is when two species cannot physically reproduce because a zygote is never formed since the sperm and egg don't have the right proteins to do so. This might sound like a weird example, but if you have Velcro shoes and you don't have the right material on both the strap and the base of the shoe, you will never be able to successfully use the straps because they will never be able to stick. Having the same material on both the strap and the shoe is similar to how the sperm and egg must have the correct proteins in order to fuse and form the zygote.
Now that we're done with all the types of prezygotic barriers, let's move on to postzygotic barriers. Remember, these are barriers that happen after fertilization.
Our first example of a postzygotic barrier is reduced hybrid viability. This is when offspring is made, but it is too weak to live long enough, so it unfortunately dies early, never getting the chance to reproduce. Take, for example, when sewing. Despite having a great machine, it is also necessary to have really good material. If the material used aren't good, then the clothes made will be worse quality and won't last as long because they are easily worn out.
Another example of a postzygotic barrier is reduced hybrid fertility. This occurs when the hybrid is sterile and therefore cannot reproduce. An analogy of this is having all of the equipment to make a cake, but not having any of the ingredients like flour, sugar, or milk, which are all necessary in order to bake anything. This lack of ingredients is similar to how a hybrid does not have the eggs or sperm needed to reproduce.
Another way to think about speciation is as two groups, allopatric speciation and sympatric speciation. The first group is allopatric speciation. This is when two groups of species are split up and cannot reproduce because of a physical barrier, such as mountains, preventing them from doing so. While in this example we are using mountains, other barriers such as highways, lakes, and rivers can also have the same effect.
The other group is sympatric speciation. This is when two groups are in the same area but cannot reproduce because of some other non-physical barriers, including behavior, timing, or anatomy, preventing them from doing so, all of which are explained earlier in this video.
Overall, speciation is very, very, very important in evolution because it is what allows new species to evolve and fill different niches. This speciation is also what provides the framework for biologists to understand the development of Earth's biodiversity. This development of new species is what has created such a diverse existence in both marine and terrestrial life. Without this pivotal process, life on Earth would vary little to none, and the difference in colors, sounds, and appearance that we have all come to know and love would not exist. This, if you ask me, would lead to a pretty boring Earth,